writer of Ecclesiastes may have something of a gloomy take on life, but don't write him off on that account. Perhaps because he doesn't find it easy to rest in future messianic hopes. Instead, he offers a powerful practicality. Engage with life in the here and now, he says. Life doesn't stand still. Savor it, lean into its pain, and celebrate its joys. Live all of its seasons to the full. Somewhere behind it all is God. But this book is not one that brings God near to us. It seems that for the preacher of Ecclesiastes, God will always be remote. W. Sibley Towner reminds us that for this preacher, it's life's simple blessings that tell us that we're not alone, and that behind it all, God is on the throne.
We are not certain about the time, the gender, or the exact vocation of the person behind the title Kohelet, or Ecclesiastes. When an ancient editor speaks about Kohelet in the third person at the beginning and the end of the book, masculine pronouns are used, so let us use him in speaking of him. Recent translations call him teacher rather than the older title preacher, both because the title Kohelet can be construed this way, and because the editor says of him, besides being wise, the teacher also taught the people knowledge. Based on the Hebrew he uses and the spirit of the Hellenistic period his thought exhibits, we guess that he lived and wrote around 250 BCE, long after the time of King Solomon, to whom the book has often been attributed. We do know that the teacher believed in God. Though he never uses God's proper name, Yahweh, he uses the generic name, Elohim, 40 times in his book. God, the God of Israel, is on his mind. However, the teacher depicts God from his own unique angle. No overused theological cliches in his book. Here are 6 of his assertions about God. First, God is the absolutely sovereign orderer of the world. Listen, I know that whatever God does endures forever. Nothing can be added to it, nor anything taken from it. Second, we human beings cannot know what specific deeds God actually does. God keeps the hand of providence well hidden. Listen, I saw all the work of God, that no one can find out what is happening under the sun. However much they may toil in seeking, they will not find it out. Third, everything that happens is decreed by God. Listen, in the day of prosperity, be joyful, and in the day of adversity, consider. God has made the one as well as the other. The established order of all things is the theme of the most famous passage in the entire book, the one that begins, "For everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven." Nevertheless, fourth, God made us free to choose good or ill and holds us responsible for what we do. In other words, God, who determines everything in advance, establishes a moral order that is somehow not already determined. Listen, I said in my heart, God will judge the righteous and the wicked, for he has appointed a time for every matter and for every work. Fifth, God is to be feared. That is, held in the profoundest awe and respect. Safety and success can come only to those people who approach God this way. Listen, I know that it will be well with those who fear God, because they stand in fear before him, but it will not be well with the wicked, because they do not stand in fear before God. Finally, remote and unknowable though God may be, God gives human beings the means to enjoy life and expects us to do it. Listen, go eat your bread with enjoyment and drink your wine with a merry heart, for God has long ago approved what you do. Is that predetermined happiness or what? In another place, the teacher tells his young pupil that God positively expects him to enjoy life and will hold him responsible if he doesn't. Listen, rejoice, young man, while you are young, and let your heart cheer you in the days of your youth. Follow the inclination of your heart and the desire of your eyes. But, or even better, and know that for all these things God will bring you into judgment. To sum up, the teacher depicts God as the powerful but remote maker and disposer of all things, inscrutable to human eyes, expecting people to fear God, and generous in giving people the means for enjoying life. Now notice what is missing in this portrait of God. In Ecclesiastes, God is not an actor in history doing mighty deeds of liberation as God does in the Pentateuch, or sweeping away nations, even Israel and Judah, who violate the covenant, as God does in the prophets. Salvation history, salvation itself, are not God's work in Ecclesiastes. Someone has noted that in this book, God works not in mighty acts, but in minor acts. Kohelet teaches that we can perceive God's care for us best, and perhaps only, in the mundane blessings of food, drink, and loved ones. Also missing is the personal relationship of an individual with God, like that richly testified to in the Psalter and throughout the New Testament. Also missing is the dependable retributional scheme of Deuteronomy and the former prophets, which holds that God will certainly reward the righteous and punish sinners. In all candor, says the teacher, in my vain life I have seen everything. There are righteous people who perish in their righteousness, and there are wicked people who prolong their life in their evil doing. Hope, too, is a theme nearly absent from Ecclesiastes. Nowhere do we hear of a coming Messiah or of God's victory over evil in the last days. Resurrection and life after death are not part of the work of the teacher's God. Time marches on, and the endless cycle continues. What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done. There is nothing new under the sun. Since it was first proposed for inclusion in the canon of Holy Scripture, Ecclesiastes has had its critics who said this picture of God does not cohere with what we hear and believe about God from the rest of the Bible. They're right, of course, but they miss the point. In Scripture, God gave us a whole library of books with different perspectives, all of which have a vital word to say. And among these vital words, we also receive the teacher's word of caution about claiming to know too much about God. This book in Scripture permits us to acknowledge that even within a world made and preserved by the absolutely sovereign God, sometimes bad things really do happen to good people. And sometimes, as at Auschwitz, no mighty acts are forthcoming. This book comes to caution us against speaking too easily about who God is and what God will do. We don't know for sure. The Apostle Paul echoes this idea when he reminds us Christians who are confident that we have seen God's mercy and truth up close in the ministry, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, that now we see in a mirror dimly. Now I know only in part. All of us believers can profit by this reality check from the teacher Kohelet. Never be rash with your mouth, nor let your heart be quick to utter a word before God. For God is in heaven, and you upon earth. Therefore, let your words be few.